So I'm a creative, and lately I've been super stressed and worried about all these bank runs and bank blowups, and ultimately wondering about the question of where to put money. I suffered a bank run. What is this crazy orange thing that just goes up and down? So it's like magic money? What are the alternatives to the US dollar? I've been talking about love, dating, health, wellness topics. To be fair, I consider wealth part of wellness. I guess you could call it wealthness. I'm gonna be brain dumping about Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse, the Fed, interest rates, Web3, Bitcoin. There's this crazy $1 million bet on Bitcoin going around right now, and the global impact of everything. And hopefully water it down so you can kind of see my thought process. I guess you could have a sense of humor about Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, they're selling these fleeces for $1,000 on eBay. Elizabeth Warren asking if Silicon Valley banks are going to return their bonuses and salaries that they earned in the last 5 years. When this Silicon Valley bank run happened, everybody started withdrawing money. I think the rest of us thought that maybe this only impacts the VC world, the tech world. The rich VC world is not the only one impacted by this. I first saw this information floating around Twitter from an account by Balaji. Summer last year, the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City already knew about the weakness in the banking system. 300 regional community banks were identified to be at risk of the same thing that happened to Silicon Valley Bank. This is concerning because, is my bank impacted? Whose banks are impacted? All right, let's just talk like basics. Banks take your money as deposits, right? And what do they do with them? They put it into investments. If you remember, interest rates were close to zero, so you could borrow money for free. The business of a bank is to earn interest on your deposit. So if interest rates are near zero, how in the world are they going to make money? A lot of them took this risk of putting it into long-term bonds. You put it in for 2 or 3 years, so they earn 1.5 interest rate on your deposit while you earn zero, which is fair. But the problem is the Fed started cranking up interest rates to almost 5% within the span of a year. What does that mean to this 1.5% long-term bond? That means it's losing money. If you sell it early on the market when interest rates are at 5% and these bonds are only 1.5%, no one's gonna wanna buy that. So if everybody's trying to take their money out of the bank has to sell this investment at a loss to give you your money. Unfortunately, part of your money is missing. And the bond is just debt from the US government, and they pay you interest to borrow your money. That's all it is. The US Treasury manages in and outflows of money into the government. The Federal Reserve manages the money supply and interest rates, and the FDIC is the organization that insures your deposits. So to solve these bank runs, the Federal Reserve created this program called BTFP, which is basically saying that they're willing to take the bank's losing investment and hold it in exchange for a loan. And they're willing to give a loan for the full value of the bond. They're willing to lend money to all these banks that need it to give depositors back their money. So it's like magic money. He's saying here that banks are insolvent, that we should have learned to distrust bankers after the 2008 crisis. He's basically inferring that because the dollars have unlimited supply, the value of dollars continue to fall. He's a proponent of Bitcoin because he's saying that Bitcoin has a fixed supply, which means it's a good place to diversify your money. The Wall Street Journal reports here that dozens of banks may have the same risks as Silicon Valley Bank. This was reported last year, 2022, in November, and the FDIC was already worried about these bond investments that were losing value on all these banks' portfolios. These are the regional banks around the US. So it's like, okay, it's just regional banks, right? But then here's Bloomberg reporting how scandal and mistrust ended Credit Suisse's 166-year run. Credit Suisse is a global bank that is systemically important. It's pretty clear that what's going on with the community banks in America and the Federal Reserve has widespread systemic impact around the world. So UBS is taking over Credit Suisse, cutting 9,000 jobs and downsizing the bank. And they're buying it out for like a third or a fourth of the value. Usually when a company collapses, all the debt holders, bondholders get paid back first. And in this case, they just decided to change the rules and wipe out the institutions that lent Credit Suisse money and pay out the shareholders. Moody's warns of more pain for US banks and they downgrade the sector. Here, Balaji is saying that the world has been conditioned to believe that Federal Reserve bonds as investments are the safest asset in the world. And now we're seeing this blow up. Gabor is saying that there are more than $22 trillion in the US banking system. And the FDIC that's supposed to insure your deposits only covers more than 1% of all these deposits. This is a global problem, which is like why I'm so stressed out. We use a community bank too, Ally Bank, which Warren Buffett owns a stake in. You know, I was looking into Ally Bank to see if we need to diversify our deposits there. All central banks around the world are worried. And so what is the Fed gonna do? So basically, remember the BTFP program, money swap line to major central banks, like money swap line? Who the heck knows what that means? Well, the Fed is doing the same program for all central banks globally. Arthur Hayes here is one of the CEOs or founders of one of the biggest crypto exchanges. He's saying that the Fed is basically bailing out foreign banks as well. All these banks around the world also hold bonds as investments, and these bonds are called treasuries. Everybody's holding a huge loss, worried about a bank run. The Fed is giving the same loan out to everybody. How does that impact us everyday people? Like, where do we put our money? All these banks are FDIC-insured up to $250,000. What are the rich people doing? They're transferring their money to brokerage accounts / checking accounts, Fidelity and Pershing. They're putting their money into money market funds. Everybody has access to this kind of instrument as well. Let's say you just want to diversify your bank. So in the US, Wealthfront actually partners with 8 different banks to offer you up to $2 million in FDIC insurance. What if you want access to something outside of the US dollar? What are the alternatives to the US dollar? You can put your money into gold, silver, in like a stock exchange or stock brokerage. You can put your money into other currencies, Bitcoin or Ethereum. Coinbase actually stores cash in FDIC-insured bank accounts as well. One exchange that I trust is called Kraken. The Kraken Bank is fully reserved. There's no lending activity with your cash, so you don't have to be worried. If you want to have cash on this exchange for easy access for buying and selling Bitcoin or Ethereum at whatever point you need to. Cash App, Wealthfront, Coinbase, Kraken, all these platforms provide easy access to Bitcoin. There are some cryptos that are backed by gold, like PaxG. Other options are brokerages that also have a banking function. Things like Wealthfront, Robinhood, Charles Schwab. There's a lot of options. Charles Schwab's stock dropped a lot, but they're reassuring investors that everything is okay, and they're seeing 16.5 billion of more money flowing into their brokerage. And what about businesses? Businesses, I've heard, are moving their deposits to Mercury and Bluevine. This kind of thing just makes you question the foundation of everything. The other interesting thing about Silicon Valley Bank is that people who are into Web3 and crypto know about USDC, or USD coin, which is a crypto token backed by dollars in a bank. And they happen to put over $3 billion backing USDC in Silicon Valley Bank. This kind of thing is just intermingling everywhere. The value of the US dollar coin dropped to like 90 cents at one point until the Federal Reserve stepped in to try to help Silicon Valley. The thing about Web3 is these tokens trade 24/7 globally around the world. The US government up until now has kind of been limited to, 2-day transfers. They only operate, 9 to 5 during the weekdays. Well, the Fed just announced FedNow, which is a payment system to allow banks to instantly transfer. FedNow doesn't use cryptocurrency technology, but it is definitely something that the Federal Reserve and the people in the government are looking into. So then you go down the rabbit hole. China has a central bank digital currency and it's very good at monitoring people. Big banks buy out regional banks, and the agenda is to have big banks control your money. This Dr. Profit guy is saying that sooner or later all stable coins will vanish before a government issued stable coin comes out. Tokens that are backed by dollars in a bank. Ultimately, Bitcoin will be the best stable coin out there. It's definitely not stable today. If enough people adopt it, then yeah, it'll be stable. Kind of like the whole world adopts the US dollar. So it's like relatively stable to everything else. Part of the reason why all this stuff like affects me so much is because I got like super involved in Web3 in 2021, and I suffered a bank run in the Terra Luna ecosystem. And Terra Luna was trying to create its algorithmically maintained stablecoin. There were a lot of builders, a lot of dApps, a lot of companies, organizations, groups, creatives in this ecosystem building it, and it's very vibrant. Like the UI UX was top notch, and it just felt like it was a paradigm shift. Unfortunately, the system underwent a bank run. There was an exploit that just plummeted the value of everything in the ecosystem. So I still have some pretty tough memories from the past couple years. So whenever the issue of bank runs come up, I don't want to be affected again. So I just have to like look into it. Okay, so now the big $1 million bet concerning Bitcoin. James Medlock says he bets anyone $1 million that US does not enter hyperinflation. Because there's this big debate about all this free money and free loans. Is this going to cause hyperinflation? And this Balaji guy that we've been talking about since the beginning, he uses Bitcoin as his foundation to make this bet that within 90 days that the US will enter hyperinflation because of this banking crisis. A lot of people on Twitter and in the media are kind of up in arms about this bet because it's kind of bombastic. And he's saying that his bet is a way to ring the fire alarm and help people discover Bitcoin as a global safe haven and to be prepared with Bitcoin before it's too late. Everybody's got their own take on this. He's saying that if we enter hyperinflation, it's going to cause social unrest and cause production to halt. So the last thing you're worried about is Bitcoin, because you're going to be worried about your food and safety. This guy is saying that's a $1 million marketing stunt for Bitcoin to make money from Bitcoin going up because he owns a lot of Bitcoin and to get a lot of people looking at his podcast. Chris says he did it for virality and it worked. McKenna's like, please no hyperinflation. I mean, nobody wants hyperinflation because we've seen the damage that it's caused in third world countries. And Airmass is saying, relax, bro. Hyperinflation is going to be great because it's going to make the stock market skyrocket, Bitcoin skyrocket. Pentoshi is also like a Web3 guy. He's also talking about civil unrest, riots, basic necessities. So just be careful what you wish for. It just makes everybody think, like, should I be owning it? Why should I own it? Why do I want to own something that goes from $3,000 to $60,000 down to 15, back up to 28,000? What is this crazy orange thing that just goes up and down like a roller coaster? So GCR Classic kind of brings us back down to reality. Like hyperinflation, probably not within 90 days, but forecasters on Metaculus are saying there's a 5% chance that the US enters hyperinflation before 2050, within 27 years. And GCR Classic brings up another point, fractional reserve banking, where you take in deposits, you lend it out, and you never have all the money on hand. This will lose sustainability because information spreads so quickly in social media. Slowly but surely, people will demand an alternative, a new path, Genevieve is saying that the Silicon Valley bank run was the fastest in history because information just spreads so quickly. The US dollar has been the global reserve currency of the world, the currency that everybody agrees to use since 1945, almost 80 years. Every global reserve currency before that has lasted about 100 years. Then we have about 20 years left, which kind of falls in line with the forecasters on Metaculus hyperinflation by 2050. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, like, what does this mean? They're raising the Fed funds rate, which major banks have to pay each other to borrow and lend from each other, in effort to prevent hyperinflation. And this rate trickles down through the economy and impacts everything. It's the reason why mortgage rates are like 6 or 7% right now. How do we get hyperinflation? Instead of running the country like a legit business and making profit, like collecting taxes, cutting down on expenses, we just issue a ton of cash to pay for our debts, to pay for our expenses. So what does it mean that interest rates are at 5%? There's like $31 trillion of debt, right? Not all of it is at 5%. What's 5% of $31 trillion? This is a lot of money. Like, where are we getting the money to pay for it? This caused a global impact on everybody else's currencies. At some point in 2022, the British pound fell 25%, the euro dropped 15%, the Chinese yuan was down minus 15%, the Japanese yen was down minus 25%, and the Mexican peso was up 7%. Everyone in the US is moving to Mexico or Mexico City to enjoy an amazing life for a third of the cost. So if people are using more pesos, maybe we should put our money into pesos. I don't know. That thought definitely crossed my mind. Maybe you want to diversify into Chinese currency. Well, I found an ETF called CYB. Some people actually think about an alternative as putting money into big tech, like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta. They're huge companies, they're worth trillions of dollars. Maybe they'll pay a dividend in the future, who knows? But other countries are thinking about this too. A paper published about the BRICS reserve currency, exploring pathways. Brazil, Russia, India, China, the possibilities for diversifying reserve holdings and reducing the vulnerabilities associated with the dependence on a narrow range of currencies. A narrow range of currencies means just the US dollar. Other countries don't want to be in the position where the US does something and then they're just impacted and there's nothing they can do about it. So let's get to it. Why is Bitcoin an alternative? Let's take a look at the current status of Bitcoin and what it has to offer. Bitcoin is country agnostic, so that's the first thing. It is maintained on a global network of validators, computers running all over the world. It's decentralized, 17,000 reachable nodes spread across the whole world. If any country falls apart, you can be sure that your Bitcoin won't be gone. And Bitcoin was founded after the great financial crisis in 2008 as a way to solve this issue of transparency and storing value, because we had a banking crisis in 2007 as well. There's a hard-coded monetary supply, 21 million coins that are distributed, and every 4 years the supply that's distributed gets cut in half. People choose to trust in the system with rules laid out instead of the whims of human behavior. The network hasn't been hacked, it's been running smoothly. The longer it's around, the longer people believe it will continue to be around. Let's take a look at Google search trends. This is the past couple of months, and you can see, like in March, interest in Bitcoin ticked up a little bit, but what about over time? This is like the 3-year chart, and you can see that it hasn't really ticked up significantly. People only look into something when everybody's already buying Bitcoin, the price is already sky high. When the news hits, it's just too late. So we could think of this time, the next year or so, as like the quiet time for Bitcoin. Sheldon Evans, another like Web3 influencer, he's saying that Bitcoin whales have been selling you their bags since October, and they'll keep doing it as long as you keep buying. How has Bitcoin behaved since the Silicon Valley bank run, since March? So Bitcoin is up 14%. Gold is up 7%, and then financial stocks are down like 13%. But what about in 2023? So you have Bitcoin up a ton, like almost 60%. Gold is up 7%, and then financial stocks are down 9%. Good to keep this in mind to know, like, some people care about the price. Some people just buy these assets and they forget about it. There's always that weird mentality where as soon as you buy something, you want it to be worth more. What are countries outside the US saying about crypto? Hong Kong is officially allowing all retail investors to invest in large cap cryptocurrencies. So large cap is like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Cosmos, like the ones that have billions of dollars worth of value. Japan released an interim proposal on Web3 policies last December, signaling that the government is committed to fostering the growth of Web3 businesses in Japan. So we've talked about all these alternatives, diversifying your cash into different bank accounts. We talked about people putting their money into brokerages that have checking and banking services, putting their money into money market funds, people putting their money into the stock market, big tech companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft. Instead, you can physically buy gold and silver bars, index funds that track the price of gold and silver. You can buy like GDX, is an ETF that tracks gold miners. You can put it into a token like PAXG, which is backed by gold in a safe. Bitcoin or Ethereum? If you have any other questions, let me know. If you have thoughts about what I've talked about, hit up the comments, and hope to see you again soon. Peace.